Hey again, everybody. Hope you're having a great show so far, and welcome to Championing Innovation and Change. As MOPs professionals, we often find ourselves summoned to the call of new technology to be implemented, new processes, and sometimes, since we're on the front lines, we often are the first ones to identify the need for change. And so we're super fortunate to have Sarah Kennedy Ellis with us today, who is no stranger to championing innovation and change. She's held senior leadership positions at both Marketo and Google Cloud during high transition periods. So Sarah, share with us, thank you so much for being here. Share with us some of your adventures with championing change and innovation.
Yeah, thanks, Tyson, for having me. And a special thanks to Amanda for always being integral in that process. But yeah, listen, championing change is, I feel like it is not unique to any marketer. I feel like that is all we spend our days, energy, late nights and long hours doing is being champions of change, because marketing and frankly, just the way our customers and the world engage with brands, with companies, with their careers, with investments they make personally and professionally, all those things are continuously evolving. So it's a marketer's job is to be nonstop in the mode of constantly trying to stay one step ahead and often trying to catch up to where everything's moving across a multitude of dimensions, while frankly facing and battling challenges of questioning marketing's value, always making having to redefend and kind of relitigate investments that are needing to be made to continue to grow the business and be passionate, convicted about that, while we're also staying as closely connected with our customers as possible to try to stay ahead of that change and make sure our companies don't fall behind. So I've had some great experiences over the years in that, but it's been really a treat, I think, to be a marketer who didn't know coming into my profession how much we're actually change managers and operators essentially. And on, the best days, we also get to be, creatives and authors and storytellers, and bringing that all together is it's a super fun, just place to spend the most hours in a given day, doing that work.
Yeah, thank you for that. And agreed. It feels like sometimes marketing is the designated risk taker on the part of the organization, or always out there placing bets with real money and things of that nature. So definitely we're no stranger to it. A lot of us, we hear about the spoils of championing change when it goes well. There's also in my experience, there's been a lot of risk as well. Are there any of the characteristics that you've seen, approaches people have taken that really help you have a higher chance of coming out on top, having implemented an innovation that sticks and gotten buy-in from the teams?
Yeah, it is incredibly tough. And I think also for marketers, a lot of times, you may or may not stay in one company and thus one culture for, a decade or even half a decade. And it takes a long time to start to understand the dynamics of how organizations work and where influence lives, where motivations are in certain, partners and stakeholders, and really what they aspire to achieve as a part of their role in their job day in and day out. And the larger the business becomes, the more complex that stakeholder matrix is. And I think for me, the thing that served me most well, I think in that process of leading and driving change, is just being committed to just basically over rotating into listening and learning, and just starting out of the gate to be quite curious and being comfortable in my ignorance. And actually, I love, I've grown over my career to love the first 90 to 120 days in any job, because you get to ask every stupid question that there is, and there is no stupid question, as we know. But making sure that you're building that rapport with the stakeholders, understanding the culture. If you've been there for a while, you probably know a lot of that if it's kind of a new initiative that you're now trying to drive. But not just all stakeholders, because there are the public-facing stakeholders, but then the ones who actually have different people's ears and different influence, whether that be, the CFO's ear, who's that person, who's the person the CEO tends to lean on, or at least in that organization, go deeper to lean on when they have a big problem to solve. Figuring out where those points of influence are across an org is always, I think, served me well. And then making sure that what I don't love is when there's a culture of editing in a community sense. And what I mean is doing the work behind the scenes. It's really important to be transparent, I think, with all stakeholders of what is the objective, what's the mission, and what's the business outcome we're trying to drive toward, but then not necessarily doing the ugly work in front of everyone. And I think that's something I've done a lot in my career is you take it behind the scenes, you put some things together and give them things to react to, and then build buy-in and try to make sure you're aligning anything that you're proposing, figure out what their motivations are and what one thing can you connect with in that regard. And just being over communicative, I think, in every change process, whether it's disruptive and seen as innovative or even small, everyone at their core and heart of hearts, there's some small part of change that like makes people uncomfortable or they perceive, real or not, may have a negative impact on them short or long term. I think getting to the heart of that in the one-on-ones that you kind of go through in the process of just doing discovery with stakeholders is the most important time you'll spend. So you can figure out what those things are and make sure you try to be sincere in solving for them along the way. But also make sure that you're open to having your mind changed because you're trying to change minds, but you're not going to always be right. You need to always be confident and convicted, I think, and passionate to go into these kind of labor of love change and transformation projects. But
that's a brilliant insight, one that I've seen stepped in a lot. I may have stepped in it once or twice before, which is you get really excited about this change. You're quite convinced yourself that it's to everyone's benefit.
Right.
And you're coming in for approval, not for input, and really you should be coming in to listen for what are my blind spots, what risks am I not seeing, what unintended consequences or impacts. So I think that's right. Going in with the utmost intellectual honesty about this idea can still not be the right way, and
Totally.
maybe because of some reason I don't know or understand. There's another sort of dichotomy I struggled with in a couple different. You've been part of large organizations. Is the old African proverb of if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
How do you balance? I mean, there are aspects of championing change that really needs to be done quickly and without a lot of consensus building, and then and there's types of change that are best to do that. Some of the daily sustaining innovations. But how do you balance that with a lot of the more complex and time-consuming parts of understanding who has a stake in the outcomes, who will be impacted, and how to get their support?
Well, I mean, often if it's change that's complex enough to change the definition of even one person's job or the way that you're going to invest dollars and shifting it from one bucket to another that crosses functions or crosses boundaries that are not in your own control. I think finding small things that you can rip the Band-Aid off and actually are proof points, and maybe not necessarily pilot tests of any respect, but actually just going deeper on changes you can make that actually are leading kind of toward a bigger change that you're trying to drive, and use that things that are fully within your control that you can do. Just I think not spinning too many cycles on those it's really important to go fast, because frankly, failure is in your control, and you can 80-20 your way through any of that, maybe 70-30, because you're going to clean up any mess that you create, right? But when you're actually driving transformation that requires multiple functions and it impacts an entire organization and hopefully your business in a good way, if you do it well, I think that it's really important to make sure that you're transparent in upfront. Just some of the things that are risks, because the thing is about driving change and innovation, right? Like no one's ever coming in most of the time. I mean, I hope not. No one's ever coming in self-serving in that respect. It is a painful job to be the person who's at the forefront of driving that. And you have to go through a lot of rounds and often run into political battles and things that just have nothing to do with the purity of the thing you're trying to achieve and deliver value onto the business or your customers, or more broadly, your stakeholders and shareholders. And I think that for me is something that you have to always assume good intent. But I do think, going it alone, sometimes I have a tendency to do that in certain ways and areas. But I really love going deep with my team and doing surgical little things that we can go deep on in our MarTech stack, or looking at other things with our lead scoring model we should be tweaking, or what have you. Figuring out different things you can do to make small improvements while you're trying to drive major change. It's important to build your own credibility, I think, in those small wins, but it's really nice if you can connect them to your bigger purpose and use them as data points to help sell stakeholders and leaders.
I think that's right. I think one thing over the years I adapted to is building hypotheses and then using your feedback sessions really to validate and invalidate your assumptions. And that puts the onus on the scientists to do the work of formulating a really robust hypothesis. I feel like a lot of the projects, at Amazon, they have, you go through 1 million doc reviews and a very small percentage of them ever become anything. And people get really frustrated. And a lot of times it's because they brought that to the group, sort of a half-baked hypothesis, hoping the group would fill in all the blanks. And I feel like there's a form of laziness there that really you should push it to the best of your ability, get the hypothesis as crisp as possible. And it turns out, there's a pretty widely distributed gift of criticism. We're really good at it. Like people are just naturally good at reacting to,
it's sort of like a dopamine hit, I think, for people sometimes. If they can, poking holes is actually sometimes too enjoyable for people, but
you use it, you can kind of use it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. So I was thinking back to, I ran the innovation lab at Sabre, which is a travel tech company. I don't even know how many years it's been. It's 7, 8, 9 years since I did that job. And we were responsible for corporate innovation and also running a true R&D and experimentation lab. And and partnering with startups and trying to bring our company that was a very traditional, it had been a part of American Airlines and an airline culture that was trying to become a tech company in a very, again, traditional overall industry with aviation and hospitality, and the tech behind it is, it's been forever on a journey. It's been a challenge to evolve. And we came in actually, I think, thinking back to kind of even your first question, like we came in with an approach to what we were going to do, which was stating a known hypotheses across, frankly, a multitude of different categories. We actually went into the executive team, let them vote on what those categories were going to be and the projects we were going to pitch them. But we had a stated, there was a true end date. There was a deadline where it was an 8-week scope. And if it was longer than that, it was too big of a project for us to experiment on. And the whole purpose of the team was actually to risk mitigate what we didn't want our product and eng teams to be spending time doing, because they needed to be all about what was core and was going to deliver revenue and value to the business. And we sold into an airline culture the concept of driving disruptive innovation based on the value and the benefit of it being a risk mitigation and risk management technique for our CFO, as well as actually cost savings, because it was much cheaper for our team to go hammer on Raspberry Pi whenever that came out in 2013 or whatever. We turned our entire headquarters into a hotel and figured out how do we use location-based and geofencing. We had a device lab, and one thing would come out of probably every 50 experiments we did that we would funnel into the core product and eng roadmap. And it was exactly what we should be doing. It was the cheapest way for that company to find the fastest path to the right thing to be investing in sooner than our competitors were. And that ironically, selling the investment in innovation team and an innovation lab through cost savings and risk mitigation is absolutely something that has been done. So
that's super counterintuitive, but I get it. And what a genius approach. I saw Joe. I just want to respond. I did not mean to disparage Amazon. Many, many wonderful innovations have come from docs.
I didn't do it.
I've gotten some docs through. I'm proud to say.
Oh, listen, I work with a lot of new amazing people from AWS, and I am in a doc rabbit hole all day, every day. So I appreciate the genesis of it and the value of it, but it is a different culture that is converging with other cultures. It's fun to kind of watch people react to it.
Yeah, so. Just reacting to Aiden's comment too. I mean, one of the things I went into Amazon as a PowerPoint guy and had a pretty abrupt and violent transition to go through. But one thing I saw there that just flipped me to be an advocate was I realized in the environments I've been in, mostly venture funded, fast moving startups, really? The loudest voice, biggest personality sort of won most of the arguments. At Amazon, it's the soft spoken engineer that just pierces a deadly blow to this idea, and probably wouldn't have spoken up if there wasn't a doc to review, facts for them to be able to go, sentence 2 of paragraph 4, do you have data to support that claim?
Yeah, that's actually a great perspective to have on it, because I haven't thought about it from that angle. I know a lot of very bold and confident people from AWS who also could sell it, even if they, but that is really great because yes, it lets everyone's like all ideas are equal in a sense, and the greatest idea with the most validation actually wins. So I think it's a great culture to have.
I had this scary realization that probably the bulk of the IQ in the decision-making environments I had been in before weren't participating, which is scary when you're trying to make ideas work and make money. You want the smartest folks doing their magic, and we didn't always do that.
Well, and finding the genius in kind of layers in an organization that just naturally aren't going to be on the front row, first to speak, last to speak, all of that, like finding ways to make those individuals who are super talented and priceless to an organization able to contribute whether it's in a through a medium or their own style or their own format of whatever that means to them, making sure that you're the average of the kind of genius of your entire collective workforce is what can come to bear versus the loudest and them that's first to anchor on whatever it is that's going to become the thing you go do versus the very best. And I think that's it's a really important thing, I think, as leaders that we all have to do across our organizations.
Yeah, sort of the forums that you create have biases built into them that favor certain personality types, and you just don't want to miss any of those perspectives. Like some of those soft-spoken folks saw parts of the business the rest of us didn't, and we're in touch with implications that we couldn't see. So just definitely, I'm a true believer now. But back on innovation and change. You mentioned disruptive versus sustaining. Before change management. It feels like at one end of the spectrum. Yeah. Necessary, but once you get into high impact changes that are going to touch a lot of folks, and usually they're the ones that have the most potential value and risk. How do you champion disruptive change without just being labeled disruptive? Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I've thought about this a lot throughout my career because I've gone through phases of what my label was, and I was at Sabre at a company where I think I was one of the first millennials maybe hired right out of grad school. I was 25, I don't know, 25, something like that. I would have to search and hunt the halls for someone who was in my generation because they just had hired, like, it was MBA only. And so that was going to already put you in a category, which is, not bringing fresh talent right out of undergrad, which is sometimes the very best thing you can do to infuse new life and thinking into a business. And I think I sort of made actually a brand internally for myself by being the most outside in type of perspective. And so when we were looking at a new problem or a new challenge or something, or an investment, whatever, it was kind of, I started to be sitting at the table having the conversations because I was sort of seen as, she'll tell us what all of the startups in this space are doing because she weirdly knows. And, and it was, I added a lot of value because I was seen as the person who I was studying startups every single day in the travel industry to kind of better understand what did success look like and what was actually driving disruptive change that was sticking. Because there was the travel industry graveyard is littered with startups, all had great intentions and great ideas, but couldn't figure out how to make it stick in a very traditional industry. And I think that was, for me, a great thing. But I became then known as kind of the big idea person going into running the labs and R&D team. And I had a finance executive turned head of a business unit who ultimately ended up hiring me in my first CMO job. And it was my last gig at Sabre running the marketing team for our hospitality SaaS business. And he and I were, yin and yang, but in the best way. It was sort of, I learned so much from him about finance and sales and how to run the most rigorous operation possible. And I was the person pushing him to think bigger. And we both gave each other comfort, but also a really cool foundation for what we got to do next. And he's now running the hospitality business at Oracle today. But we actually just caught up for dinner the other night. It was just fun to kind of remember like the dynamic of having completely different perspectives and actually you being the big idea person. But sometimes you're going to turn, and I told him in our dinner, I was like, you're going to laugh. I've become the person seen as like the conservative, slow us down for a minute to go fast. Because I'm now take 2 more weeks because you can sprint, 30% faster for the next 2 years. And I used to be absolutely the opposite. I was speed, sprint at all costs, 80-20, which would creep into then 60-40. It was like, that was what I was known as in my 20s and early 30s. And then as I went to Marketo in a private equity environment, and then in Adobe, and now it's kind of become interestingly more balanced. I don't know if that comes with age, experience, I don't want to ever lose that part of myself. But
well, often, I mean, so I've also gotten the inevitable, idea guy label before,
totally.
and you really want to be the good idea guy or gal, not just the idea guy or gal. And it usually takes a partnership like the one you mentioned. Like that's where good ideas come from, is that balance of, sort of adventurous spirit and someone who's a little bit more tied to reality and implications. I think that's, when you find those balances are really, really special.
And they're hungry for what, you're perceived to bring as well. And I think that balance, that creates respect, and it creates actually a super powerful tornado of influence across a lot of different things that can make great things happen. It's why I've leaned in a lot in my career with my CFO in whatever capacity that, has come in our organization through. But finance is one of the most important partners I have on the marketing side, whether, I'm in a big idea mode and disruptive innovation mode or not, there is always a business case and always the right answer. If you're going to do something and do something that big, there's got to be a significant business benefit and outcome that has, it's worth everything you're going to put into it. And finance appreciates that and can help you articulate that in a way that most, other functions, can in certain respects, but you need your CFO to be willing to write the check, or at least when the check hits their desk, they don't say, what on earth did we do that for? And we don't have a great answer for that. And so I think that's been important. It's an important thing for big idea people.
Yeah, I've seen too, one other thing that I think most people expect the idea folks, the innovators, the change agents, to be bullheaded about their ideas. And so can really neutralize a lot of resistance by being being very intellectually honest, able to come off of an idea, able to morph that idea based on new data presented.
Right.
I think that's really some baggage that comes along with the innovators label, is that this is just someone trying to impose their idea on the world, not necessarily.
And they don't understand how the business works, right? It's like, you've got to be a CEO, and whether you're an innovation and disruption driver or, a finance or sales leader, everybody you benefit most, and the business benefits most if you show up as a CEO first, who happens to have deep expertise in one or two or three areas. And everybody showing up that way creates just a really powerful team of people and individuals who can get great things to market and bring great value to customers. And I think that's finding a special mix, I think, across a leadership team of all the different skills, and they can come together and work together to drive that change. It's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I've definitely found that the client, the customer, is the cloak of invincibility. As long as you are genuinely and honestly always thinking from the customer's point of view, it'll keep you honest. It'll keep you from running amok with ideas you become enamored with. And it's also really hard to refute by the various stakeholders, in a healthy organization that puts customers first.
It's where the passion comes from too, for all the obstacles you're going to face along the way to drive change. If you don't have a customer and a person and a human in the story of why this is worth it,
right,
and that they benefit, it's not just the business and the bank account, but it's all about the individuals you're trying to serve, and that thus benefits the business by doing that really, really well and really thoughtfully. And I think that's always been the thing that has recharged me. It's what Marketing Nation community I've shared many times was my recharge and reset. If I was struggling, I literally would just go hop in the Slack channel for 15 minutes and I'm good to go. Remember why I'm here. Let's go do this. Right. And just the labor of love that is so fun to be able to pour yourself and your role into a group of people who are doing something that's going to have a legacy, it's going to last. It's just a really cool way to spend a career.
You're absolutely right. You just, in the startup world, the name for that magic is product market fit. When you get that, when someone comes up to you and grabs the cheeks of your face and says, "You fixed it for me." You know what I mean? I was so frustrated about that, and finally someone did this. That's really, really good. When you really have served someone, you've really solved their problem.
And you heard about, they tell, they probably give too much credit, but a lot of, even at Marketo, a lot of the conversations we would have, and I went deep into the quantitative research when I started hearing some of just the anecdotal comments of Marketo changed my career. Marketo is why I got promoted. I make now X amount more than I used to. all of that. And now that's true across a multitude of different MarTech, stack like pillars. There's a myriad of tools that have actually become game changers for people. Not that the tools are doing, it's the people actually putting it in practice and bringing new value to the business. And marketing operations leaders are literally the CEOs of driving that change and being the ones bringing that to bear. But it is really, it's really cool to be building technology that actually has a direct human impact on someone's livelihood, on the dollars they're going to use to send their kids to college one day. Hopefully, having a little more there and allowing them to get days, added to their retirement when they're able to go spend time with their family. Like those days and those small dollars, they add up. And I think in the life, of an entire life's work, that's what I kind of hope I get to look back and see.
That's what it boils down to. We got a great question from Janice Lee.
Yeah.
She's asking if we can hear from you about, being in large organizations, especially like the size of Google Cloud, where they've got various teams coming up with disruptive changes and ideas. How do you control which ideas get approved and prioritized for rollout? And importantly, avoid teams working in silos, on those ideas?
It's a great question there. And Google, there's layers to it. Google Cloud in its own right is massive. And then there's broader Google. And there's to your point, like there's so many different ideas. There's so much coming to life that could be really exciting to pursue, but having the discipline to put the case together for why. I mean, it's a fairly simple step. And I do think Google does it very well. And I think AWS, that was another great example, right? Of just discipline around that and being data driven. And every single decision we make at Google is core and it's foundational to how the business has become as successful as it has over the years. But I would say, I prefer to think about it as not controlling the ideas. I think the very best ideas are driven by passionate, convicted leaders who saw, like we were talking about, a need for change that meets a need of a customer that's not being met. And I'll give you a very specific example. Like if my team and I went deep into the billing and payments flow in our free trial, right? Digging in surgically to say, oh man, this group of individuals that prefer this type, of payment, for example, are struggling and there's an issue. We're wasting 2 minutes of their time that we could give them back if we did something a slightly different way here or there throughout the process. And we all went deep into figuring out how are we going to save them seconds of their life? How are we going to actually give them back that time and make it easier to get value from what they're, trying to get access to from us? And I think the teams that are willing and able to experiment and go small before they go big, that's almost a self-controlling mechanism, because those are the teams that then start to build the data set that then is the foundation for any kind of business case that would then drive a transformational change that we might go make. And that's how we operate, is just experimentation, testing, incrementality, and looking across the board at where can we move quickly in a small way to learn enough to go make a big bet in a large way. And that is just how Google works, I think, across at least the PAs I've had, business units I've had the opportunity to work with, but I know certainly Google Cloud does.
Yeah, and I would just say from the Amazon world, I love what you said about not trying to control the process of innovation. People see different things from different perspectives. I remember I was in Amazon payments when an Amazon payment solution popped up in another group and went, and launched, and you're like, what? And we didn't even know about it. Like our clients, customers are like, hey, how is that compatible with this? And you're like, so part of it is, you don't want to control it. You don't want to stifle it, but you probably have to have some systems in place to organize and channel those ideas, because it would have been great, at some point for there to have been a mechanism that brought us together to collaborate. But I don't think that was by design. I think it just, but certainly the worst of the two sins would be to stifle the innovation.
Right.
Competing with yourself is better than not getting the innovation.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I'll take that problem all day long.
Veronica brings a follow-on, which is how do you stick to your priorities in the face of people trying to disrupt just for the sake of disrupting?
It's an interesting question, because I think there are points in time, I think in different companies in my career where that has been, there's sort of a persona of maybe that type of person.
Someone trying to make their mark or something.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe earlier on and frankly, maybe someone probably viewed me that way at some point. Yeah. I do think now it's different slightly for me today, because it's such a massive challenge and an opportunity that everyone who comes to particularly Google Cloud, we respect the opportunity to an extreme degree. We have, significant investment and opportunity and a growth trajectory that's just like, it's exciting to be a part of. And so there's not a lot of self-serving in that. It's everybody's focused on the mission and how do we create the most inclusive and accessible cloud in the world and make sure that we're bringing new people and we're changing the face of what the developer community even includes and looks like, and making it a broader base of just diverse thinkers who are actually building whatever the future will be. When I'm one day retired, like that is really an exciting mission, and it sort of rallies people around something that's got a greater purpose to it. And I think you tend to see the people who are there to disrupt just for the sake of it they sort of fade into the background, or they don't ever actually take on that challenge because that's not really, they're not going to have time. They're going to be, just for the sake of it. But I think there's others that are really good, provocative, what I would say, pushers of others. And I think that's actually sometimes maybe earlier on in your career, you can be labeled as a disruptor. I have an amazing partner I work with, Brian Hall, who runs product marketing for Google Cloud. And he and I joined around the same time, and he comes from AWS. And he's all about speed all day long, every day. And I love him for that because he's always pushing. And it means that 80% of the time he's probably right, and we need to go faster. And you need that extra push of someone who's helping an entire organization drive disruption and change, because we do have to go faster. And then there's the 20% of the time, maybe we need to go, just slightly geared down to then go super fast and like turbocharge.
I love the way one of my leaders put it was, we need to go as fast as we can, but no faster. like to go faster, meaning you're going to make bad decisions, mistakes.
Exactly right.
And so it's an interesting dichotomy. And, and Veronica, I would just say too, I think I totally agree with you, Sarah. In a large organization, it's just such a huge investment to champion change that there just isn't a get rich quick scheme. You're just not going to survive it. Most folks out for their own glory just aren't going to make it through the journey. I think in a smaller one, I've definitely seen outsized influence by certain individuals have their ideas get fast tracked at the expense of definitely superior ideas that would have had more value for the business and for customers. So, it's harder in that smaller environment. You don't have the protection of sort of a gauntlet that you got to go through to get innovations.
But I think it's also important to never allow yourself to go through a year where you weren't either advocating, driving yourself, authoring, or supporting some idea that made you somewhere between slightly to very uncomfortable. And I've kind of always had this concept at Marketo, my team, after the Adobe acquisition, it was also a time of integration and transition for everyone. And we had this is respectfully, but with a very positive bent around it. It was more of a, give zero craps once a week.
Yeah.
What are you going to do that might risk your reputation or your job, but it's best for the business, or it's best for our customers, or it's going to make a difference because you're doing it altruistically because of the right motives? Yeah. And how do you start to let go of job security and fear around any negative consequence of quote failure, or having the one of 100 ideas that's horrible, one of 10 that is going to be pretty bad, and maybe 5 more that are just not good and then a few that are going to hit, right? You've got to be willing to go through all those cycles and do that with the support and advocacy of leadership that really demonstrates and sets that example. But it is, you have to have a mindset about it. And I've always had the blessing, frankly, in my career of, for whatever reason, I never cared about losing my job, even though I always should have. And it freed me up to do my best work and to make sure an organization was constantly being challenged and pushed forward. And you have to have those people who are like creating a little bit of friction to make sure we're always enough on the edge that we're going to actually have the ability to go faster than our competition and to do more and do better.
I love it. So forgive the sports analogy, but the saying in there that covers that is never play not to lose.
Right.
Right? Play to win. And so every day wake up and figure out, what am I going to do today to better our chances of winning? Not what am I going to do today that's safe?
Right. Oh my gosh. It's the perfect example too. And at Google Cloud, we're a challenger brand. It's the first time I think I've ever worked for the true challenger versus the leader or the perceived almost, and someone made a choice long before me, not someone, a collective of someone's,
Right.
that Google was going to invest in a cloud platform, and absolutely with the ambition to one day overtake maybe, very established and very successful players in the space. And our job is to not come in and play it safe. Our job is to actually find the way to accelerate and to leapfrog. It's all about what are our leapfrog opportunities. And we're doing, the people that came before us a disservice if we're not being bolder in our thinking and our engineering and the things that we're bringing to the market, and even the tone and the style, how we approach that. Like playing it safe just makes you more like, everyone else. And that's not going to ever make your car go faster than the one you're trying to catch up to. And so I think that's something you have to constantly remind yourself based on different points of maturity and different phases of growth and different companies' journeys. And this is a new one for me, but I love it. It's part of why I came to Google Cloud, was exactly that. I was like, yeah, let's go do something crazy, but also let's go do something.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly right. I got myself in a little warm water by saying, one of those docs I presented, the response was, "That sounds hard." And I said, "Are we here to sit on our Amazon?" And the reason, what I meant there is, a whole bunch of people before us did really hard things.
Right.
And we now have the privilege to not do hard things and still make money. But that doesn't seem like the respectful thing to do, right? Like resting on your Amazon is not the way to continue to innovate. We've got to continue to do hard things, scary things.
Yeah, I love that.
All right. Looks like we've got a little bit more time. So one of the things that I'm going to be selfish, is one of the things that was always disappointing for me is at the end of what might be weeks, months, or even years of work championing material change, no sooner does the launch happen and you finally did it, do the haters come out, right? The cry for the way things used to be, or the old ways. And there's just, and it's often a minority, but just really takes a lot of the wind out of your sail for all the hard work you did advocating for the customers and whatnot. There's always going to be some pain, associated with change. And, what do you do to mitigate that as much as you can up front? How do you handle it when it comes? I call it innovator's remorse. It's almost like right after they bought the thing and it's all up and running, there's some folks who are going to experience, some stakeholders who are going to experience some form of remorse.
Yeah. It's kind of like innovator's remorse is always better than, status quo keepers remorse.
Agreed.
So I kind of start from that foundation. And I think it's really important. Number one, I think early days to be over communicating the small wins that are, again, parallel pathing to the bigger ambition, and making sure people can come along the journey with you, and being super transparent as you go on that journey. If you don't, everybody fills in the blanks for you. Even if you're off doing the hard work and you're going to come back with a big bang, like you've lost the audience, you've lost them. And I think that's a really important thing to be just committed to. And if you aren't, great at that, find a partner to help keep you in check there, because if you can't let that go. I do think also figuring out just I mentioned the influencer stakeholders, like making sure you're staying really close to them, getting their feedback and advice along the way, making them feel ownership, not new advice, that you haven't heard before on that, but just constantly reminding yourself to find that stakeholder map and make sure you're leaning in there. And again, like bringing back small value to them, and delivering on what you promised or what you committed, in terms of the things that matter to them, I think are important. But I think, also never promising perfection along the journey. Like every time I make a large change, as I've gotten older, I've started to be really explicit about it. Like I'm going to get a lot of things wrong. And it's thinking about things as, as boring as like a reorg, all the way to driving just a completely disruptive new idea and going to launch and market with it. Like I tell people, we're going to get at least 20% of this wrong. And I'm asking now for your, forgiveness and also patience, but also your like radical candor on what those things are, so we can figure them out as fast as possible after we get past that first step and that big first phase of change. Because then we're going to have a lot less painful, iterative, changes that are going to make the overall vision come to life, and also them be a part of shaping that. So I try to bring everyone along and be very upfront about, we're going to break some things. We just don't know what we're going to break yet. It's kind of like something
totally.
else wrong in a wedding. You don't know what it's going to be till you're in the
Yeah, and that's the thing. I know the words I always use to cover that too is just, hey, these are the things that you cannot figure out. You have to find out. Like there's just, you can only figure out 80% of this stuff, and then you got to find out the other 20%. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to reap the spoils of this innovation, right?
And by the way, if you're going to do something where everything is some of it's just a guess. A lot of things are educated guesses if you're driving truly like disruptive change. But pick the thing that you'd be willing to go down with the ship for, because it won't matter. Like the risk and the fear of not having enough data or being paralyzed by not being able to make a decision because you're waiting for that golden light bulb moment, it's not going to come. So make sure that you feel so passionate about what it is that you're doing. You believe in it so much that you're going to enjoy the journey, even if it doesn't quite go perfectly. Like that's something I've always taken with me, because you've got to have that to go, again, to be resilient enough to make it through.
I use you'd have to be an absolute fool test, which is what position you're taking. You have to be able to say, you'd have to be an absolute fool to disagree with that, right? Like customers want their stuff faster. Like, who's going to take the opposing position of that? You know what I mean? Like, and so you just want to choose those things where you feel you've got the data and the conviction that this is definitely better for our customers. And I think that is really great wisdom.
Actually, one thing I'll say on that too, I think Marketo was the perfect example of that, because the place where I could lean in and I had, absolutely unapologetic, just commitment and conviction about anything we did. It was, if the community was driving any part of it, it was going to be successful. So even if we were stepping out on a limb or going out on a ledge, if they were bought in and, they were along on the journey, that made it helped, kind of tamper down a little bit of the fear, but it also was like, we're going to go do this together because we all collectively believe it's the right thing. And we all think it's, worth our time and energy. And that in itself is its own kind of journey to go on. And so I don't know, that was for me, I think, especially like the Fearless 50 that we launched, just the support that we got from the champions, who were, by the way, some of the hardest working marketing ops leaders in the business and still are. They had gone through, I don't even know how many hours, days, and, months of interviews and applications to become seen as something that was like the ultimate end all be all for Marketo at the top tier level. Right. And that's hard work. It's blood, sweat, and tears. But they were the biggest supporters and advocates of driving the Fearless 50, which was a much smaller bar to cross over, but it helped us expand the community and invite more people in who weren't quite at their level of expertise, but gave us, all different types of marketing leaders in the mix. And, if you think about a community, they easily could have been like, no, because we want all of the focus and investment here. And that's another community that's not quite as special, hasn't invested the hours. But they had really cool stories to tell. And a lot of them crossed over, but a lot of them were part of the genesis of that. And it was a really beautiful thing.
Oh, and I love that, because that is just such a safe bet, right? Even if you're smarter than anyone, you're not smarter than everyone. And you are using that collective perspective to protect. There's just a lot of great covariance in there, making sure that you have built-in protection from being wrong. Because when that many smart people agree, you're probably on a great.
I'm like, JD, Joe. I'm like,
bunch of nerds.
I'm lucky to know them. Just from the time we had together on all those fun things.
Yeah, what a great story. I love in our prior conversation, just some of the examples you gave of a genuinely community-led growth. Yeah, pretty cool experience.
And I think about it now. So I'm now nerding out over Web3, like judge me or don't. I know it's crypto winter, all those fun things. But it is so, the reason I've been so drawn to Web3 and just the concept of decentralized anything is, I think, because of how passionate and how powerful the community was, honestly, at Marketo. And I didn't connect the dots on that till recently, but I was sharing with Tyson, there was a time whenever we were going through the acquisition with Adobe that we had kicked around, should we actually give our champions in the community equity in the brand of Marketo? Because technically they built it and they continue to be the ones that invest in it to make it as valuable as it is. It's not my little marketing budget wasn't doing that on its own. That was the community. And so how do we give them ownership as that value continues to grow and we may, sell the business and be acquired? Like, how can they be a part of that? Well, now, fast forward a few years later, and I'm like, didn't know I was talking about was just a DAO, like a decentralized autonomous organization that actually everyone has shared ownership, and there is no, single owner. It's like everyone owns and is, has a vote. Now, it's just the concept of community is not new, but it's feeding into all these places that it's kind of being repackaged as something new. And I've thought about decentralizing, my marketing budget and how we think about our investment decisions and creating even a DAO within my own team to be everyone is equal and has an equal vote. And that's core to Google's culture. It's bottoms up driven. That's been kind of the heart and soul. So we've kicked around some things just to help people get closer to the customers that we're also now serving in that space that are very different. But it all goes back to the heart and soul of just a community, and the power of that transcends generations. It transcends different eras and, maturity phases of a business and technology evolution, like all of that. It transcends it all. And it's always equally powerful. It's just how you can put it to use and really bring more value to the community and vice versa. So
I'm just imagining in my head the just epic collision of traditional thinking about how a business equity, it was, you were headed for private equity. Like the very
don't think I didn't get thrown out of I brought up
very traditional thinking. Yeah, very traditional thinking about how an organization is owned and how it creates wealth and all of that. And then, sort of that community mentality, just a super, super disruptively different way of thinking about.
Clearly I failed. Clearly I failed, or else Joe retired.
That's a big ask. I think that's a lot of change. A lot of change.
It was so cool though to have such a catalyst and inspiration of these individuals. It wasn't like us, putting lipstick on any. It was literally like I could go away and anybody could come through my chair, and that community and that brand would have still continued to invest in one another and continue to be more and more valuable. I still only use purple hearts. I literally do, and everyone on my team probably thinks I'm weird. But I only use purple hearts if I'm using emojis, and people are like, I'm like, it's the best. It means the most love, because that's right. Purple of the community that was the foundation of, where I was schooled on it. So
awesome. Well, Sarah, this has been absolutely spectacular. And I hope for all of you out there, you got a lot of great golden wisdom on the adventures with change and innovation, and hopefully you're better prepared now. Really, really heartfelt thank you, Sarah.